Hello, hello.
What's happening, everybody?
Hey man, it was a fun week of football we saw.
Another week.
Fun.
Fun.
Yes.
Some of us had fun.
It was fun for the majority of the weekend. I enjoyed up until Saturday night.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Well, we'll talk about the fun that happened this weekend. We'll also talk about the fraud train here in a little bit.
That's right.
But yeah, just go grab your drink, join us, and we'll see you in a second.
All right, week 6 is in the books, guys.
Week 6 is over and done.
Historic week 6.
Some teams are still celebrating their Cumberland River walk.
Yes.
Some teams are unfortunately recovering from some anguish.
Yep, that's also true. Actually, there's a lot of teams.
There's a lot of teams. They're anguish and they're it's easy to cry when you're a fraud, right?
True.
When you get exposed.
That's right.
So, but why don't we kind of quickly, or well, I'm going to go through it quickly. Go through our games of the week from last week. I think I said Clemson, Florida State.
You did.
And you didn't say this in like week 0. You said this past week.
I did. I thought it was going to be interesting. I think that with all things considered, Clemson kind of underperformed a little bit. When you only win 29-13 to a Florida team Florida State team who has not looked good all year. And they were playing with I was going to say their backup quarterback, but I mean, I guess he's going to be their starter now. It was an interesting game. So I think Clemson should have shown out a little bit more against Florida State, but that's why you play him on the field. Good old Brock, I think, is going to get some love this year. Because he's going to do a lot better than DJU. So
I don't feel like it takes much to get that much better.
Yeah,
that's why I said a lot better and not just better.
Yep. So who had game of the week for what was yours, Dennis? I can't remember. It was
Michigan and Washington.
Gotcha.
So, yeah. Okay. That was definitely a fun game to watch in so many ways. Michigan obviously very much underperformed. We're surprised. I don't know how they were surprised, to be honest. But I don't know if to say that they were caught up as frauds. People knew exactly what they were. They were going to run the ball, and that's it. I'm surprised they got over 100 passing yards total as a team. They got 113, 113. But I think they got more places of fraud for Michigan fans themselves, realizing like, hey, college football playoffs is probably not something that we're going to get into. They lost to Washington 27-17. Washington is definitely not a bad team, but definitely not the top. I would say the Big Ten.
Sure.
So I'm kind of happy with that. A quarterback that actually was at the game, Will Rogers. I feel like he played extremely well and definitely highlighted. He had over 300 yards and two TDs passing. But I feel like just to start the game, Michigan felt like they felt like they were kind of in it because at halftime they were 10-14. But I just feel like Washington probably more than anything was kind of coasting because they know they could throw the ball on Michigan. Well, once they got the lead, Michigan, if you're behind, even if it's by 10 points, you can run it, but you can't just run it only, regardless of how many quarterbacks try to play in the game at the position. So I'm happy that I was right with the upset. Was able to, I feel like, kind of show their colors of being, hey, no, we're actually the better team compared to Michigan. Michigan being ranked 10 was extremely too high. I feel like they got way too much love, and I'm happy for them to get knocked down.
I think a lot of that love was strictly because they were a national championship team. Like last year, they won the national championship. So a lot of that love was like, okay, as long as they're winning, we're not going to drop them too far. Even after that first loss, they were just not going to do it. And I think this is, like you said, Washington showing that while they didn't stop the run, I think Edwards still had like 95 yards. They limited the big runs because that's what Michigan's all about, is getting those big runs. And then they also took care of the defense. There was there were no defensive touchdowns, which Michigan kind of, I don't want to say relies on, but a lot of times they do end up with a pick six or something like that. And so they're kind of hoping for that. And the defense, they didn't allow the defense to keep them in the game or make those plays to kind of squash Washington's momentum. So I think
the bigger lead. Washington themselves missed 2 field goals, so it could have been a bigger difference right there.
And Rodgers had a pretty bad interception too.
That one, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you look at some of those things, you take those, you add those into Washington's offensive prowess at the end of the game, and it's a much bigger game. So the defense definitely something to do with it. But I think this is the blueprint. This right here is what every team should look at going forward. And it's interesting to me that not every team had done that, because this is exactly who I think most everybody thought this Michigan team was. They're going to run. They're going to play defense. They're going to want to get a defensive score, and they're going to want to put up 200 plus rushing yards on you. And if you can limit all that, you're going to win the game.
Sure.
No, and I really agree with that. It's just the fact that I feel like it was only literally the past 2-3 weeks where they finally decided to be a run only team. Where previously, like, even though they didn't really have a passing team, you still have to respect the talent that Michigan overall has.
Right.
So they don't need the greatest quarterback in the world to be able to throw to them. I mean, they haven't had one in a while, but if you can get to them, like, their skill players can make a play. But as you're saying, hey, now you got the blueprint of what they're going to be doing for the rest of the season. They're extremely stoppable now.
And by skill players, I think you mispronounced his name. His name is Colston Loveland.
That's how you say it. My bad.
Yeah.
English is my second language, so I forget sometimes.
Well, so I mean, the fact that it was basically, I mean, it was a rematch of the national championship.
It was.
And you had Washington, who was, by their own coach's admission, in a rebuild year, just arguably wiped the floor with Michigan. I mean, that's pretty good. Like, it's a really big really good indicator that Washington's on the right path to be competitive in the Big Ten. But it's also a really good indicator, if you're an Ohio State fan, that Michigan's probably going to be bad for another 10 years. It's amazing what happens when you have your cheaters leave. I mean, your elite coaching staff,
right,
is named after
another mispronunciation there.
Yeah, sorry. Allegedly, the alleged cheaters.
And we'll get into it in a little bit, but Washington, new coaching staff did better than their old coaching staff.
Listen, we'll talk about that.
We'll talk about that later.
We'll talk about that right after we get into, like, so my game of the week, I think, kind of started the weekend of fraud alert stuff just going off. Last week I called that I have not been as high on Missouri as you two have been this year. And I've been consistently calling for their upset. Because I just consistently think that they're not that good. And I was proud to report that Texas A&M proved me right. I mean, you
by no stretch of imagination.
No, 41-10, and that 10 is that number didn't look. It wasn't that close until like the last 2 minutes of the game. So I mean, every ounce of this game just screamed Texas A&M just owning it. And Missouri fans want to whine and complain about, this PI call not, being picked up or whatever. Sure. Okay. I didn't realize that a PI call would have given you 31 points.
31 points. Yeah.
It's a hidden trick in the game of football. Not a lot of people know about it.
Exactly.
It's a glitch in the matrix.
Exactly.
I also didn't realize that a PI call, would have kept Texas A&M from running 512 yards of offense, total offense against your team. But the other thing is when it comes to the penalties, and this is the thing in Missouri fans just seem to be really ignorant on, is if you look at these stats for penalties, do you know how many like what the penalty differentiation was or difference was between Texas A&M and Missouri?
Yards or number?
Just like, well, so both. I mean, you can look at both, but basically Texas A&M had twice as many of both.
Oh,
They had twice as many penalties and nearly twice as many penalties and more than twice as many yards. So that's not a good excuse for Missouri. Their team didn't show up. They just thought that they were going to just steamroll Texas A&M. There was a team later that day. There's two other teams later that day that I think thought the same thing about the team that they were going up against in the SEC. And both of those teams were proven wrong. Texas A&M just showed that they are still in the playoff contention. I mean, they're the number one team in the SEC right now from a standpoint of record. From a standpoint of heart, they're not. There is one other team that this past weekend secured their place as the number one team in the SEC.
I think a lot of people's
maybe in the country.
Maybe in the country. I mean, granted, they're still not ranked in the top 25. And for some reason,
our hearts don't have rankings.
Our hearts, yeah, that's right. That's right. But anyways, that does lead us into lunch. Let's launch into the afternoon of fraud alerts.
Yep.
Or did you have something else you wanted to say about?
No, I was just going to say with Missouri, like one of the interesting things to me has been how high Missouri fans have been on their team. And, obviously you start off the year and I think they had Murray State and like Buffalo, and they just blew those teams out. And like, that's great. Everybody was supposed to do that except Florida State. They did handle their business. But then they went into BC. BC, they get the win, but it's like a really close, like I think it was like 6 points or something like that. BC has been good, but even their big win against Florida State to start the year off doesn't look so great now. Yeah, then they go against Vandy. They win by a field goal in 2 overtimes? Is that right? While Vandy missed 2 field goals that would have won the game.
Now, in their defense, that actually looks pretty good now.
So yes, but again,
I'm
just saying that you go through these games and you're going, okay,
on a week by week basis now.
Week by week basis, you're going make BC make sense. Only beating them by 6 as a number 9 team, a top 10 team. Make it make sense. Make beating Vandy by a field goal after they've missed 2 field goals in double overtime. Make that a good win. Make that make sense. And so I definitely think this is you just went against a team that while I think they're still ranked below BC, or they were this past year, I think they was like 24, 25. You went against a team that pound for pound was right there with you, and you got exposed. So going into fraud alerts, I'm 100% with you. This right here, Missouri is the number one fraud. Number one.
The number one fraud weekend.
Yeah.
And so, we go into the next couple games. Obviously we already talked about Michigan, Washington. The other 2 that were probably not as big for the afternoon would probably be USC falling to Minnesota and South Carolina getting exposed at home by Ole Miss. And I get it, Ole Miss was 1 favored in that game, but in 2 was the higher ranked team. But South Carolina has been talking just like Missouri fans, talking a real big game. They've kept it close with big teams like LSU. They beat the living tar out of Kentucky at Kentucky, the team that just beat Ole Miss. So it was,
but they also had a close one against Old Dominion.
True, and that's the team that showed up this past weekend.
Exactly.
And Beamer has talked about some of the Kiffin timeouts that were given and stuff like that in that game. But that game doesn't, a Kiffin timeout doesn't give you 24 points and a point differential. So
regardless of the NFL money you might have stacked behind you.
Exactly.
Right.
And Minnesota, I think, just kind of proved that if you have any semblance of defense, you can shut down USC right now. You don't have to have the best offense. And but I think USC will probably adjust some of that, but again, it still doesn't look great when you're losing to one of the worst teams in the Big Ten.
Yeah. Well, and I think with USC, the hard thing about USC is they have been such an up and down team this year. They come out of the gates playing LSU and beating LSU, and you kind of like we said, we were a little kind of confused, or at least I was confused about that team, those teams. But I wanted to give USC some credit, that they had fixed their defense, that we're going to do all right. And then, they go in and they lose to Michigan, which kind of confused me even more, because you're sitting here going, okay, am I more confused that USC lost to Michigan, or that Michigan actually going to do something this year? So this was one of those where it's just going, okay, now you're losing to Minnesota.
Yep.
It's one of those things where I'm like, I think with USC, as you're saying, it's kind of been an up and down year for them already. It's one of these where I feel like if they were to find any kind of consistency to their play, they probably would still be undefeated right now.
Sure.
And it's just with Moss, it's like he shows, I feel like, glimpse of just like, hey, you could be one of the best quarterbacks in college football, to why the hell did you make that throw, or why did you make that mistake?
Right.
And sure. Like it's such an up and down thing. Like I've had issues with that.
Yeah. Sure. And he reminds me a lot of Drew Aller out of Penn State, where just there's been multiple, years for him where you're just going, like, you have all the tools to be so great. Why can't you put it together? Now, granted, Moss, this is his first year. He played the bowl game, and I think the bowl game kind of set expectations pretty high for him. And then he came out of the gates doing pretty well. So now we're kind of seeing him get tested a little bit. And I think that early success is kind of leading to people questioning him a little bit more, when in all reality, this is his first year as a starter. And again, defense. What is your defense doing? They're too inconsistent. They've got to get some consistency.
I'm glad they're showing up compared to last year, but you're right.
Yeah, right. There's not statistically, but eye test worlds better than they were last year.
Sure.
But it doesn't change the fact that they still, like, even against mid to poor offenses, they still struggle at times.
Yes.
Then, a team that had a defense that didn't seem to struggle as much, and hasn't really struggled as much this year, their offense decided not to show up for their game, where they got severely upset. Tennessee goes into Fayetteville, and they get rocked by that game. There's a couple different major stats in that game. One, this is the first game in Heupel's coaching history as a head coach where he has been shut out of the first half. Where he scored 0 points. Granted, Arkansas only scored 3 points in that entire first half. And that's, again, credit to the defense. Tennessee's defense held for the majority of that game. I'm trying to see if I remember what I'm trying to find the time of possession, because it was very lopsided.
35 to 24.
Yeah, there you go. So super, super lopsided. And that 24 only showed up in the second half, because the first half, it was even worse. And Tennessee's offense just could not find a groove, even though they got up to 14-3 in the third quarter. Again, the defensive, you hand it to the defensive coordinator and Sam Pittman and stuff like that at Arkansas. They prepared properly. Sam Pittman actually stated that when he went to go talk to Heupel, he goes, I want you to understand, we started with the tape on Oklahoma. That's where we learned the defense that's going to slow you guys down to stop you. And it's true. That's what happened.
Yep.
And they ran confusing looks. Nico literally looked like a freshman quarterback out there. Yeah. He didn't know what he was doing. It looked like there's a lot of protection, like a lot of plays where it's just like, let's protect Nico. Just no, you don't need to go and run. You don't need to just You know, just try to just bubble screen it out. And my goodness, if I never see a bubble screen at Tennessee again, I'll be a happy person.
There's one. I mean, the last play, I'm still kind of irritated. Like, you have like, no matter what you do, the game's over.
Right.
Why? I don't know. I still don't understand why tucking the ball and running out of bounds at that was even a thought to come across his mind.
So how some Vols fans have seen it / the ones that are closer to the coaching staff have said, they're like, I think that Heupel is so overcoached ball protection that it's like he's forgotten that at the last play of the game, throw it up. It doesn't matter if it gets intercepted. It doesn't matter. Like give your receivers who are better than the secondary of Arkansas, give them a chance to make a play.
Even if they were better, it's the last play of the game and it's win or lose.
Right.
Just go.
And so like my comment to a lot of Vols fans this weekend on Twitter has been like, I'm like, this 100%, this game was 100% on Heupel. He did not do his job as a coach. He didn't prepare his team. He didn't make proper adjustments. They continued to play. I wouldn't even call it conservative. They continue to just lean on their defense for no reason. When they're down, it's like, no, you need to be trying to forward to the pedal to the metal kind of game plan instead. And then on top of that, he coached like Butch Jones. And the difference is that Butch Jones would have told the quarterback just to throw a bomb to the ball at the final play. And again, I think Heupel, I think this is going to be a wake up call for him, but we'll see what happens. And
the interesting thing, like you said about your defense, right? Like Tennessee, according to ESPN, still had a 51% win probability with 3 minutes to go in the fourth. So
to kick myself out of the game.
What's that?
I just decided to kick myself out of the stream.
Oh, gotcha. Well,
you don't want to hear no more about
he's like, I'm done.
He's like, I don't want to hear it.
Does he slander?
No, but their defense played so well for so long and ended up, again, so a couple, like, trying to give Tennessee fans and you, Michael, a little bit of, something to look forward to, right? Defense played well the entire game, and it took
they were on the field 35 minutes.
Right.
So, like, plays are going to happen.
Yeah, they played well. And then when you think about the other side of that, even though the last play was frustrating, was annoying, I think that they had a little over a minute, like minute 15, and were able to get down the field in a minute and 15 seconds with an opportunity to make a play in the end zone. Now, again, why he tucked it and ran out of bounds, no clue. But like there are some things that you can kind of take away from this game and have some form of, happiness about. But you're not gonna. That game is not one that you're gonna look back on and go, man, that you should have won.
Here's one question that I really wanted to ask you, Michael. Like on the touchdown where Arkansas scored last, I don't know if it was the secondary, the safety, whoever it was, but he seemed to didn't even want to make a play to try to tackle the running back.
He was told to do that.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure of that.
So they couldn't drain any more time off the clock. They're like, no, let him do it. Hold them because they're going to try to go for a 2. Hold them from getting the 2, which is what they did. And because they're like, that puts them at 19 points. And they're like, then we can march down the field, hopefully make a play for the end zone and we'll win.
I respect that for Heupel, the fact that I guess he has that much confidence in Nico being a freshman quarterback. Because obviously Tennessee is able to do that with that skill. I feel like if the way your defense was playing basically all game, and to Luke's point, I feel like you should have just had more confidence in your defense to be able to stop them. Because either way, I feel like Arkansas could have done it with the field goal anyways, but I don't know.
Yes,
I feel like
it's there. So some people have argued that what should have happened is Tennessee's defense should have just held for a field goal for Arkansas to get a field goal, and that would have put Arkansas up 16-14, and that probably would have given us 10 seconds.
Yeah,
good
to
point.
make it down. So it's like you 10 seconds to get to.
Damn if you do, damn if you don't.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think to get into field goal range with 10 seconds or 15 or 20 seconds or whatever is more doable than trying to get into the end zone, which has been proven to be very tough. And Tennessee has a very good field goal kicker. So I think that Heupel made a strategic call. Whether it was right or wrong is irrelevant, I think, at this point, because
it could have gone either way. Like
it could have gone either way. But again, doesn't take away from the fact that Arkansas played tough. And again, Arkansas is a team that you just can't look past. Tennessee's never been able to look past them. They haven't won in Fayetteville for 20 years. Arkansas currently has they're on a 4-game winning streak against Tennessee. So similar heebie-jeebies to the Florida game that Tennessee's about to play. Differences Tennessee's playing at home. But that leads us to arguably the best upset of the weekend,
of the year,
of the year,
century.
I would say century.
Yeah,
of the past 60 meetings for for Vanderbilt and anybody in the top 5.
Like you have to be over 40 to the last time Vanderbilt beat Bama. Just on that, not the fact that they were ranked or anything.
Right, just beating 40. Bama.
Yep. And Vanderbilt beat Bama, if you haven't caught on by our banter here.
And if you didn't know before you were watching the show,
go back and watch it. It actually was a great game. It was a lot of fun to watch. One, because you see a team that should have been outclassed another team that had a 90% blue chip ratio. Which is just nuts. And so Vanderbilt has never won against a top 5 opponent in the history of their school. And they won with an FBS quarterback from a group of 5 team last year, who couldn't even get a scholarship when he was going into football 2 years ago. I mean, the guy just straight up baller, and he had a lot of grit. And Vanderbilt look good. They look scary.
Yeah. And that's the thing about this is a lot of times when you have these upsets, you have an Alabama who shot themselves in the foot 30 times, who couldn't do anything right. And you had a Vanderbilt team who just kind of was the benefactor of, some weird bounces or whatever it may be. That is not the case for this game. In this game, Vanderbilt beat Alabama. Alabama didn't beat themselves.
Nope.
Like Vanderbilt was not lucky. They had turnovers and they had a pick 6, but they were all because of good plays from Vanderbilt.
If you keep the ball away from Alabama's offense, like obviously it's going to happen, but the fact that Vanderbilt, I think time possession was 42 minutes.
Yeah. It's ridiculous.
So it's crazy the fact that Bama scored in 17 minutes or almost 18 minutes, 35 points, but the fact that Vanderbilt was still able to kind of withstand that and keep the ball. So that means they were constantly driving, constantly getting first downs just enough to be able to kill that clock. It's that consistency that got them the game.
Well, and like the fact that Vanderbilt was never behind in that game. They led the entire game, which is also just insane. And as Cole Kublik, the announcer for the game, said, he goes, all of Alabama's like star players are on their offense. You're keeping the offense off the field. You're doing exactly what you need to do.
Yep.
And what Vandy did was they proved what Georgia could have done the week prior and won, which is just run it down their throat. And because I was saying that during the Georgia game, man, and I was like, why aren't they running it? Like Alabama has no run.
The other thing that Vanderbilt did that Georgia did not do was there were 2 different times where Ryan Williams had one of those catches, right? He had 2 touchdowns. I think one, I'm sorry, not catches. He had a touchdown. The last touchdown was technically a run, but he had like a 60-yard, I think it was like 57 or 58-yard pass for a touchdown. And Georgia, that happened to them, and you saw them get deflated, and you saw them have that like, oh crap, here we go. Vanderbilt it happened. And then I think they went on like a 9-play, 60-yard, drive for a field goal, and then held Bama again and went on a 7-play, 53-yard, 5-minute drive for a touchdown. Vanderbilt never got phased. They took Alabama's punches, and this was literally like Rocky versus the Russian. I can't remember his name, where he's just like, he got hammered, but he just kept coming. They did not let him beat it. And it was so much fun. And I remember them getting the ball. Alabama kicked the ball after that last Ryan Williams touchdown. And there was 3 minutes left.
Oh, I think we lost Luke.
He froze just like Bama's defense did.
Are we back in?
Yeah. There we go.
But okay, so they kicked him the ball with 2 or 3 minutes left, and you're going, okay, I can see why you're doing this. You're gonna, and I was sitting here. We were actually at a family member's birthday party, and me and my dad were watching the game at our table on the phone. But it was we were watching. I was like, they need 2 first downs. They need 2 first downs. And then they immediately ran for a first down. First play, they ran for a first down. I'm like, okay, they still need 2 first downs. I did not expect Vandy to get a first down on the first run against Bama in this situation. But you're just going, okay, you knew they were going to run, and they still got 12 yards. So Vanderbilt, my goodness. Especially being in Nashville, and you always hear the jokes on Vandy and, them being the worst team in the SEC, which is really all true. Let's be honest. This was cool. And I really wish that I had been somewhere near Broadway when that goalpost was moving down Broadway.
Well, yeah. And I love all of the trolling that Vanderbilt's own team did after the game, where they're tearing down the goalposts, and they're playing the Nick Saban comment from a week earlier where he's just like, well, the easiest place to play in the SEC is Vandy. You never lose at Vandy. You're going to
no disrespect. No disrespect. It's just true.
He's just consistently poisoning the well for Bama, and it's glorious.
I love that. One of my favorite ones for memes and stuff like that, or just things being said, is the fact that you're going to have your doctor 10 years from now saying I was on the Vanderbilt team that beat Bama.
Yeah.
And
that's true.
The patient is going to be a Alabama Alabama fan. They're going to get more sick instead of getting better.
Well, and let's also give it to the Vanderbilt fans. You've got the Vandy, or I'm sorry, the UT fans who, how far did they have to carry the goalpost to get that?
Not even a mile.
Yeah, not even a mile. Vanderbilt went 3.4 miles. Now, remember, this is not UT. This is not Florida. Most of the people carrying these goalposts are going to be doctors and engineers, and they type and work.
Well, and most of them weren't even at the game.
Right.
Yeah. There was so many. The fans got him out of the stadium, and then people in Nashville were just like, this is awesome. We're gonna just do this together. There was more. There were more people there walking down Main Street or Broadway than I think it was 2 or 3 times as many fans as there were actually in the game.
That doesn't really take much.
No, but
to be honest,
still.
And then of course, they did a rescue mission for the goalposts, because they're supposed to be, they're supposed to be building the stadium, not tearing it down.
Right.
Now they need to update the goalpost though. From what I was told, it was the old school steel ones and everything. So they did the work for them.
Yeah, they somehow the construction crew had not gotten to that part yet, and the fans just took care of it. But yeah, 3.4 miles, good on them. Way to carry that. Way to carry that goalpost. So, but no, that was. I really think there are games. I've talked before about the Boise State Oklahoma game being one of those games that I just remember watching, and I vividly remember where I was sitting, what I was watching, what I was doing. This is one of those games that I'm going to remember watching it, and I'm going to just remember being oh my gosh, they're going to win. So,
yep.
Very cool.
Man, and it was just glorious, because all of in my mentions and on Twitter all week leading up to that game, just Bama fans all looking past Vanderbilt. I was like, you guys shouldn't look past Vanderbilt. And they're all sending me gifts and stuff like that about them looking past things. I'm like,
So here's a funny story. That Saturday morning, my kids had soccer. We went to the soccer games. We played the soccer games, and my wife was randomly like, "You know what? We haven't gotten the boys' haircuts." So we stopped by, the Great Clips that's near us. Hey, Great Clips, if you want to sponsor. But we stopped by the Great Clips, and so we're getting there, and they're getting their haircut, and there was a family in there, and they were all wearing Alabama stuff.
yeah.
And so I was kind of talking to them. And their son, he was 9 years old. His name was Luke, because I remember it, because obviously my name's Luke.
Yeah.
He goes, "Oh yeah, we're just gonna demolish them." And his mom goes, "Oh son, don't do that. Don't do that. You're gonna jinx us." And I said something. I was like, "Well, good. We're leaving." I'm like, "Good luck on that game." She's like, "Yeah, I really hope we don't lose now, because all you're gonna be thinking about is, oh, Luke from Great Clips made the Alabama lose." So Luke from Great Clips.
Way
You
to
made
go.
Alabama lose. 9-year-old
go.
kid. Hopefully you don't see this, because I really don't want you to feel bad. But
Nope.
but yeah, so I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah, that's funny. So do we think there's going to be as much turmoil this weekend? Let's get into our games of the week.
Oh my gosh, man.
Week 7. I know you're like, please don't. Please no.
Every week it seems like it's like you can't beat Florida State going 0-4. Oh, you can't beat this, and then all of a sudden Vanderbilt beats Alabama. Like,
yeah. Well, there's
crazy.
been I think statistically there's been more teams that are that have like a 14-point spread on them from Vegas that have won against the spread this year than in previous years. Like, just teams that were complete underdogs have, like, it's, and I'm just, which I don't, I mean, we're starting to see the rise of NIL. That's one of the potential benefits to NIL is the parity. But yeah, so Dennis, you want to start us off? Because I think you've got an interesting matchup that you've picked for this weekend.
Because you've got the worst one.
No, it's not the worst one. Yours is the worst.
I would agree with that. We kind of already talked about him a little bit. I know Luke kind of touched on Penn State, Aller, quarterback. I think my game of the week is actually Penn State and USC.
I think
I was deciding between that game or the fact that gents getting over 200 rushing yards or less. Like, I didn't mention that to you guys.
That's one thing that I will not bet against.
No,
him getting over or under. Mind you, he had to play the full game, not just halftime.
No, he's got to play 3 quarters to get 200 yards
minimum.
Yeah,
he's doing it with halftime. I'm like, I don't see a problem being all 4 quarters. But so, full decision, I guess. Now, my game of the week is Penn State versus USC. With everything we said earlier, I feel like USC now is starving for a win, especially in the conference now. And what I'm noticing too, a lot of schools are struggling, obviously in the Big Ten, like going from across the country. Yeah. And I've already seen articles where, hey, Penn State's already kind of finding ways to struggle just to travel, let alone get their equipment across the country. So I'm actually looking forward to this game. Again, USC is desperate for a win. We do have, as Michael has us here showing on our screen, USC is kind of the favorite with 51.8%. And honestly, I'm a little surprised with the differential here with Penn State actually being a 4-point favorite. I honestly thought, to be completely honest, I thought it was gonna be a bit more, especially the way USC played last week versus Minnesota. I thought it was gonna be a bigger differential when it came to that. But I feel like it's either gonna be two things. Either it's gonna be a low scoring game or a very lopsided game. I don't think if it's a high scoring game, I don't think it's gonna be all that close. But I mean,
so you're like thinking USC like domination.
That's what I'm hoping for, man. Penn State doesn't have the most explosive offense.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
Like, you mentioned before, you said countless times to me, Aller just seems to kind of fall short.
I Drew Aller now, to me, he fits in what I call the the Cutler category, Jay Cutler. Like Jay Cutler had no middle. He was either throwing 400 yards and 5 touchdowns, or he was throwing 100 yards, 4 picks, and like, you know, he was either an A quarterback or he was a D quarterback. He was never consistent. So that's kind of what I think Drew Aller is. And I like Drew Aller. I think he's he seems like a good kid. I like him. I want him to do well, but I feel like he's one or the other. He's either the best quarterback of the day, or he's what in the world are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, he has great numbers kind of going into the season. Don't get me wrong. He's only had one interception. So like the fact that he's able to keep the ball, make the correct throws for the most part, like I'm more or less basically kind of surprised by it, but I feel like he's definitely showed more growth over his play of last year, if anything.
Oh yeah. Yep. Totally agree.
I have USC as my team to win and come through with an upset.
So as we said, there's definitely going to be an upset with this game. Either USC is going to lose USC is going to win and upset Penn State, or USC is going to lose and upset Dennis.
Yeah.
Exactly. One way or another, USC is going to upset somebody.
Right.
So, well, speaking of upsets, we're going to go.
Lost.
No, that is not my game of the week. Thank you very much. Let's not go there. No, but my game of the week is a game that tends to weirdly consistently be upsets. Like it is a really strange game because it doesn't ever seem like the team that should win wins. And so I'm going with the Red River rivalry.
Say that 5 times fast.
Red River
rivalry.
I got Texas and Oklahoma, and I mean they both have had an off week this past weekend. I think they're primed for a good game. Oklahoma has gotten healthier, but they're not exactly where they need to be or where they want to be yet.
Was that a question?
No, it's not a question.
Healthier?
Their health, yeah. Like I guess I made it sound like that question.
Who put the question on the teleprompter? We all know Ron would read whatever's on there.
Anyways, I'm Ron Burgundy. Anyways, but this is just one of those games where Oklahoma, if Oklahoma Sooner Magic shows up, it's in this game consistently.
All right, Matt Mitchell.
I'm just saying.
There is one thing I've seen articles where Ewers actually will come back this week. So
sure.
To Michael's point, will he have any rust? Well, Oklahoma will be able to capitalize on it.
Well, I mean, he was
what's on his jersey.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. He was in the game last year and it didn't seem to matter. Like so, and Oklahoma still won. Now, granted, they had a much more productive quarterback, but let's be real. Oklahoma hasn't put much offensively on tape this year. And so if this is the year, if this is the game to just unleash the playbook as best as possible with as much limited talent as you've got available, then do it. And that could spell disaster for Texas because they would have been able to prepare properly. I think Texas is, again, they're right now a 14-point favorite. They've got the 85% match predictor, whatever. I look at that and I just see, wow, that's what Tennessee was over Arkansas. That's what Tennessee was over Arkansas. Vanderbilt was even worse. It was 27 points or something like that. But Tennessee literally it was like a 15% chance that Arkansas would win, and it was 14 and a half points in Tennessee's favor.
Yep.
I'm going to pick OU for the upset here. I think OU, if there's one win they want all year, it's this one.
Yeah.
Because it allows them to tell.
So cannibalized. Oklahoma wins.
It allows them to tell their biggest rival to just shove it the entire rest of the season, which is something they love to do because let's face it, Texas is an incredibly annoying fan base, and I understand why. I understand why OU has like the amount of vitriol that they have towards Texas is actually impressive. But
Well, especially considering Texas hasn't won the like
they haven't done anything.
OU has been the dominant team in the Big 12, especially the past 20 years or so. So, for them to be as annoying as of a fan base, it's like if you're annoying and you're winning, okay, like you can be annoying and
Georgia.
We won't like it, but like at least we can be like, you kind of earned it, but you haven't even earned it.
Yeah. Well, I was listening. I was reading something earlier today as a Texas fan who was up here just smack talking, which is perfectly fine. It's rivalry week for them. But he was just like, I don't think y'all understand. Like OU has the most losses in for BCS and New Year's Six bowls out of any other team in the entire country. And my response to that was that just means that they've been there more than pretty much everybody else.
Right.
And I don't see how that's even more relevant. The fact that like it's not time frame. So how does the argument make any sense?
Again, they just grasp at anything. They grasp at anything.
It goes back to everybody talking about like the Buffalo Bills. Like they lost like 4 Super Bowls in a row. And everybody's like, oh, that's so horrible. And it's like, yeah, but it took an elite dynasty Cowboys team to beat them 3 years in a row. They were there. They were the second best team 4 years in a row. That's still pretty freaking good.
People wouldn't even remember the second best team if it wasn't a far left field goal being shot.
Right. Exactly.
So, like, I'm just saying, people would have gotten that.
Anyways, so I'm picking OU for the upset. I mean, I'm not super confident in that pick, but I'm picking them for the upset just because they find a way to win those games. I don't understand it, but they do. So
I feel like the tone of the season too, like upset over anything.
Right.
Yeah. It's true. So what you got?
I guess. So James Madison is playing a really cool game this week.
I think they can actually go to a bowl game this year too. If I'm not
they're going to Coastal Carolina and
tough game.
I think that's right. Oh, I was actually right. James Madison, Coastal Carolina. Yeah, I was actually right. But that is not my game of the week. My game of the week, obviously, I've got to be a little bit of a homer here and go Ohio State. Even not being a homer, I appreciate you guys letting me do this. Ohio State, Oregon, a 2-3 matchup. I think that it's going to be an interesting game. We're going to kind of see where these guys line up, especially when it comes into the Big Ten. I think they're probably the top of the Big Ten, obviously. As you can see, ESPN has Ohio State a 64% favorite over Oregon. I don't like that. I mean, this is going to be at Autzen. So it's going to be in Oregon. Apparently, or essentially, OSU has taken away home field advantage. They are -3.5. So they are, favored by a field goal, let's say. It's very equal. When you look through their, you can see here their passing yards, their rushing yards, their receiving yards. Everybody is fairly equal when it comes there. I think Ohio State tends to have the more explosive offense. You can see by how many receptions these guys have, the number of rushes that they're a little more explosive. I think Ohio State has the better defense. But I think they're a very, very good matchup. I think they're a very close matchup. We were talking a little bit earlier. Michigan State is kind of the only team that we have both played that we can look at. Obviously, we beat them 38-7. They win 31-10. So our offense was a little more dominant. Our defense stopped them a little bit more, but not enough to really say that one team is better than the other. I think that you've got an Ohio State team who's looked pretty even keel the entire year. There's not been many ups and downs. They've just kind of gone in, handled their business, done what they needed to do. Oregon has had a little bit of down. They started the season off. It was a little bit rough. That very close game, almost upset to Idaho. You had Boise State, who realistically probably should have beat them. So you got those two games that they started off kind of rough. but they've seemed to have found their groove.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be an interesting game. I think Ohio State pulls it out. I'm going to go against my doppelganger, Josh Pate. I'm going to go against him and say that Ohio State is going to pull this out. There is not going to be an upset here unless Ohio State loses, and then there will be an upset, Luke. So
is that why you wore the black shirt instead of the white shirt?
I did. I'm the opposite. I am the opposite. No white for me today. I am going dark. So it's like Dark Mizzou. So
yeah, that didn't work out so well for them, did it?
It's dark OSU.
Yeah, there you go. Dark
but no,
OSU.
I think it's going to be a great game. I mean, I really think it will be. But I also wouldn't hate it if we just killed them.
Sure.
Do you think Ohio State's going to struggle with the travel by any chance?
I don't think so. I think that we're a little more.
I know it's a 2-hour difference, but like
we're a little more resourceful than the Pennsylvania teams that can't figure out how to travel.
Never heard of a train.
Right. No, I think and here's the thing is I know that the travel is legitimate. Like I don't question teams that, when you're going from one side of the country to the other, it's a legitimate issue. It's, your body, you have to, your body's different. If you go 2-3 hours the opposite direction and you're playing at a different time. But the thing is that there are so many games, Thursday night games, Friday night games, this is essentially your job. So regardless of
NIL, this is your job.
Yeah. Well, and it's just one of those things like it's the same way, when Oregon comes to Ohio State, it's going to be the same thing. They're moving it up. They're going to be playing at a different time. It's just something you have to deal with. So will it be an issue? I think that it'll have a factor in the game. I think it always will. I don't think it'll be an issue. I think that if there's one thing that I've noticed about this year's Ohio State team, they're playing a lot tougher than they ever have. You've got receivers who are blocking. I
feel like Ohio State's
doing blocking
a lot more explosive, or at least they showed more of it
this
year than the prior years.
But the thing for me that's the biggest thing for Ohio State this year is that this, everything is business to them. The way that they're handling everything is just, it's business. We're going into this game, we're handling our business. Things like them dancing on the field before the game, it's not happening. They're coming in, they're doing what they need to do, and I love to see it. This is what's been missing from Ohio State the last 3 years. So.
Sure. Yeah.
When you say 3 years.
Yeah. Well, that's honestly, that's legitimately there was one of the offensive linemen who was talking, and they asked him what the difference was this year. And he said, this year, last year there were practices where I wouldn't even break a sweat. And this year, I'm sweating every single time. And I heard that and I was like, oh, so maybe all those questions about toughness, maybe they weren't so far off, and not that these guys aren't tough, but man, if you're legitimately saying you weren't sweating in practice and it wasn't practice wasn't, and maybe he wasn't saying sweating. I think he was saying he wasn't exerting himself, breathing hard, whatever. But either way, if that's the case, you can still be tough and not play tough.
Exactly.
It's that I feel like it's probably because of the Chip Kelly offense. Maybe it's going to get more out of you, but it'd be interesting even for Chip Kelly to come back to Oregon.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting for sure. Well, again, we appreciate y'all for joining us tonight. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And especially share it with your friends this time. Not just your friends.
Not just one. Just not one.
Person.
You can do more than one. It's okay. We'll be okay with that.
Yes.
People, granted, I was just talking about me because I only have one friend or something like that, according to the comment that someone left. It was me. I don't talk to myself through the channel. But anyways,
there's two of us. So which one of us is your friend?
Wait, hold on. Well, business, my friends, business.
We're gonna talk about this when we go off air.
Yeah, I've stepped in it now.
Like Miami now. Shot now.
I'm gonna need a ref to overrule that one. Anyways, well, we appreciate you guys joining us for this week's tailgate. Come back next week, grab a drink, and join the conversation.